Welcome to the fourth section, Accessing and Persisting Data using Spring JPA. The first video of the section is Defining Spring Data. Spring Data is used to provide a familiar and consistent Spring-based programming model for data access, and it keeps the characteristics of the underlying data store. It is an umbrella project which contains many sub-projects that are specific for a given database, for example MySQL or Postgres. Spring Data features powerful repositories and custom object mapping abstractions. You can derive dynamic queries from repository method names. You can also implement domain base classes which provide basic properties. Spring Data supports transparent auditing like created, last changed, and it is possible to integrate custom repository code. It delivers an advanced integration with Spring MVC controllers and an experimental support for cross-store persistence. With regard to relational databases, you can connect your application to a relational database when you add one of these starters to your project and a driver-specific starter. In this section, we will deal with the Spring JPA starter and the Spring JDBC starter in the next video. Spring Data also provides additional sub-projects that help you access a variety of NoSQL technologies, including MongoDB, Neo4j, Elasticsearch, Solr, Redis, Gemfire, Cassandra, Couchbase, and LDAP, as well as auto-configuration for these databases. You can also initialize databases based on your domain model with the help of Spring Data JPA. Internally, it uses Hibernate as default JPA implementation, so that a means is provided to generate database schemas. These are the steps you have to take to create a database schema. Annotate your class with entity, table, and the name of your table. Annotate your attributes with column and name of your column. Annotate your application class with enable JPA repositories, and then add these entries for the first creation to your application properties class. Spring JPA generate DDL set to true, Spring JPA hibernate DDL O to create, and then the URL to your database. Please keep in mind to reset these entries afterwards. You have three ways to interact with your database. You can use a JDBC template, you can use the JPA repositories, or you can use Juke. This is a Java object-oriented query language. Here you can see that I have created a simple database in MySQL named test. This database has no tables yet. I have also added a new user, Spring user, with privileges on this database. The Spring user can create and delete new tables in this database. You see here the privileges, they are all set. And now let's switch to Eclipse to see the implementation. So let's switch to the POM file. Here in the POM file you see the new starters JDBC, JPA, and the MySQL starter. Here's the MySQL starter, and here is the JDBC starter. I have created a new class named Person. You see the annotation entity over the class. If you don't provide a table name, Hibernate takes the class name as a table name. The ID is annotated as an ID in the table Person, and this class has a default constructor and a constructor with parameters. We have added an interface, Person repository, that derives from the JPA repository. It inherits all necessary methods to insert, update, or find persons in the database table. You can add new methods to it. Our main application class gets a bean that returns a command line runner. Here we insert new persons in our database as initialization. We can remove this bean later on. And now let's switch to our controller class. In our controller class, we implement a request mapping to the root path. We query all persons in our database, puts them in a list, and sets it as an attribute in our model. Now let's switch to our HTML file. In our HTML file, we output this list over this block. With th double point each, you can iterate over a list. And here we fill a table with our persons we find in our database test. And now let's take a look at our properties file. We determine with Spring JPA GenerateDL set to true that we initialize our schema on startup. With Spring JPA Hibernate DDL Auto set to create, we tell Spring Boot to create our tables for us. With Spring username, password, and driver, we set our login credentials and tell Spring Boot to take the MySQL driver. And now let's have a look at our Spring database URL. In my case, it wasn't enough to set only the database URL to host and database, but I also had to add this string with settings to the server time zone. If you should encounter errors regarding a time zone on the MySQL server, use this string and adapt it to your URL. And now let's run our application. So it's starting, and the Tomcat web server is now up and running. Now let's switch to our web page. You see now in our web page the person list.